Hey guys, welcome back to Ferrigno Freedom Channel. I'm Dante Ferrigno. I have been on a carnivore diet known as the lion diet now for 3 years, a little over 3 years. Let's see, today is January 23rd. I started January 14th of 2021, and it has literally changed everything in my life. It's been amazing. 51 years old. I feel as good as I did when I was in my teens for the most part. But I saw something the other day that really kind of blew my mind. And it's a study that has to do with LDL cholesterol. And I had been saying for the longest time that we started with a false premise on why LDL is bad for us. If you go all the way back to Ansel Keys and how this got worked into our system, if you read a few books that talk about the procedures that were done, the way the committees came together, the way these scientists were able to get their works published, what was left in, what was left out, you find out that we've been sold a bill of goods, and it's just not true about LDL. Well, when I saw this study, and I'd heard about this study coming because I've been keeping up a little bit with this gentleman that's going to be talking about this, Nicholas Norwitz. And there's another guy on the project. I can't think of his name right now, but Dr. Sean Baker was even talking about this study yesterday. And I had been meaning to review this video since the day before yesterday. I've just been real busy with work lately. Got that new job starting, and it's a lot. It's a lot to process in a short period of time, so I'm getting there. But I wanted to come back and take a look at this because the name of this video is called New Study, Oreos Lower LDL Cholesterol. And my first thought when I hear that is, why in the heck would I want to lower my LDL cholesterol if that means I have to eat Oreos? Now, that wouldn't have been my first thought years ago. My first thought would have been, hey, that's great. If I got high LDL cholesterol, I'll just eat a bunch of Oreos. But from what I understand, he's been doing this on a low carb way of eating, and he wanted to kind of use something that would shock our senses into realizing that statins lowering LDL cholesterol may not be the good idea we think it is. And finding out that Oreos lower LDL cholesterol should drive that point home to most people. I am not saying that you should start eating Oreos to lower your LDL cholesterol. I doubt the presenter is going to be either. But I would sure like to know how this study went and what exactly happened, because this sounds like a game changer if the scientific community is willing to look at it and say, you know what, we've got to rethink some things. Let's find out.
Sometimes, the best way to advance science is through a dramatic demonstration. 5 months ago, I started an experiment to see which would lower my cholesterol more: standard of care, statin therapy, or Oreo cookies. Now, why would I do such an odd experiment? And which of these, in the end, did have the bigger impact on my cholesterol? Before getting into the story and the results, let me first emphasize that this experiment was a metabolic demonstration, a bold test of a new scientific model. This is certainly a do not do this at home sort of experiment, and I definitely do not recommend cookies for health.
At least we have that in common.
Over the past several years, colleagues and I have been studying a phenomenon in which cholesterol, in particular LDL cholesterol, can rise dramatically in some individuals adopting a low-carb ketogenic diet. And when I say rise dramatically, when I say high, I mean into space high levels, not 150 or 160, but as high as 300, 400, 500, 600 or more, and that's just the LDL. Interestingly, those who appear most susceptible to this phenotype, to this rise in LDL on low-carb diets, are otherwise very healthy and lean, with high HDL cholesterol over 80 milligrams per deciliter and low triglycerides below 70 milligrams per deciliter. This is the definition of the lean mass hyperresponder phenotype, a metabolic triad of high LDL, high HDL, and low triglycerides on a low-carb diet.
Okay, first thing I want to point out is that I've been doing, like I mentioned earlier, a low carb diet because I don't eat any carbohydrates except when I've been experimenting or trying to bring certain foods back into my way of eating. The point is that I eat meat almost all the time. And when I say almost all the time, the only other time that it's occasionally I have had something that I shouldn't have, or I have something that I'm trying to see if it'll work with my body. But 99.9% of the time, I'm eating meat. And a lot of times it's beef. Almost all of what I eat is beef these days. When I first started, I ate a lot of venison and a lot of lamb also. And if I could get my hands on some buffalo or bison. But I haven't seen very much of that. Occasionally I can get some elk too. But all beef for the most part. And I eat a lot of fat. I get my ribeyes cut. I get a lot of ribeyes specifically because they're the tenderest, juiciest, most delicious part of the animal as far as I'm concerned. I get them cut where they don't take any of the fat off. So I usually got a big chunk on the bottom of my steak, about this big, of the whole ribeye steak that is fat. And I eat every bit of it. You would think my cholesterol would be through the roof, right? Well, my cholesterol used to run around 100 plus just before I started eating Lion Diet. Later on, I've hit numbers in the mid 80s or the high 80s. I've hit the mid 90s. I've hit the high 110s. And recently, after 3 years of eating this way, and I'm eating more fat now than ever, I had my blood work done and my LDL was 79. I had to think about it for a second because I really can't believe that that's that low of a number, but 79. Now, I have had people tell me that if you eat a lot of fat just before you get your blood work, and then you do your fasting like you normally do before blood work, you're going to come up with a much lower LDL number. Well, I eat fat all the time, so maybe that's why mine's lower than normal. But still, I maintain very normal lipid panel numbers when it comes to LDL. As far as my doctor's concerned, he's totally fine with it. Any doctor would be fine with a 79 LDL, especially the HDL that I have that runs over 70. My triglycerides run well under 70. I think the lowest I hit was 32 or something like that one time. And my lipid panels look fantastic. So I don't get this lean mass hyperresponder thing. But I'm still interested to know about why, for one, I'm not like that, because I am fairly lean compared to what I used to be. I mean, I'm 189 pounds. I'm the weight that I was when I wrestled in high school, and I had to work to get down to 189 pounds when I was in high school just so I could not wrestle in the heavyweight class. So I don't know what the deal is with me, why my LDL is so much lower than everyone else's. But I'm not complaining about it. I just want to understand the thing better, because it almost sounds like higher LDL might actually be good for you in a lot of the ways that I studied, because your brain uses LDL. A lot of your brain is cholesterol in general, and without cholesterol, your brain won't function properly. There's other parts of your body that manufacture cholesterol for purposes that the body has, and I can't go into as much scientific detail on those, but I understand what the LDL is doing and what the HDL is doing. I just can't explain it as well as some other people do. So if you want to get more information on how LDL and HDL work, you're going to have to watch another video for that. What I'm interested to know is what happened with these cookies.
And in our prior publications, we've actually documented an inverse relationship between BMI and cholesterol on low-carb diets. In other words, the leaner you are, the higher your cholesterol tends to rise when you're low carb.
Not for me.
Why does this occur? The model we've been developing over several years is called the lipid energy model, and it states that the main driver is a drop in the body's carbohydrate stores, in particular the liver stores, which shifts energy demand from carb burning to fat burning. Now, for a dash more detail, getting into the weeds a bit, in these lean, metabolically healthy people, these lean mass hyperresponders, carbohydrate restriction increases trafficking of fat fuel to meet systemic or whole body energy demands. This trafficking system depends on the export of VLDL particles, which are precursor to LDL particles, and this turnover process also increases HDL cholesterol and lowers triglycerides, resulting in the lean mass hyperresponder triad of high LDL, high HDL, and low triglycerides. Now, based on the lipid energy model, Adding back carbs, repleting the store of carbohydrates, glycogen, in the liver should bring LDL back down. And based on the model, any carb should work. A banana, a potato, or a sleeve of Oreo cookies. I chose Oreo cookies, honestly, because it is provocative.
Yeah.
To me, a nerd and a PhD scientist, the intricacies of the lipid energy model and the lean mass hyperresponder phenotype are themselves awe-inspiring. They make my jaw drop and think, wow. Now, I want to share this nerd enthusiasm with as many people as possible and bait you into following our research journey. But to do this, I knew I needed something that would turn heads. Oreo cookies seem to do the trick. Most people know what they are, and most people don't think of them as a health food. I know I certainly don't. So, after obtaining appropriate ethics and the support of my primary care physician and a consultant cardiologist, I began the first phase, adding 12 Oreo cookies per day, about 100 grams of extra carbs, to my otherwise standard low-carb ketogenic diet. This first phase lasted 16 days. And then I had a washout period, during which I returned to a similar body composition and cholesterol levels before starting a second phase, 6 weeks of high-intensity statin therapy with 20 milligrams of rosuvastatin.
I'd hate to have to do a trial like that.
The results were stunning. In 16 days, 12 Oreo cookies per day lowered my LDL cholesterol from 384 milligrams per deciliter to 111 milligrams per deciliter, a drop of 273 milligrams per deciliter, or 71%. In fact, the reason the Oreo phase was prolonged from just 2 weeks or 14 days to 16 days is because the drop at the second interventional blood draw, which was on day 14, was so shockingly large to my supervising physician and I that we decided we needed to repeat it, at least in triplicate, with follow-up tests on days 15 and 16, and the results showed a continued downward trend at day 16, with Oreo cookies dropping my LDL closer and closer to 100 milligrams per deciliter. Now,
that is totally amazing to me. I haven't ever really looked at what the statins do, but I know from having been the medication manager as a retirement home administrator before, I've seen people on statins and their LDL numbers don't come down that low. They don't drop that far. I know that. I mean, it's mild in comparison, and it takes a lot longer. That is insane. If eating Oreo cookies results in this, how in the world can this be the healthy approach to take? We got to hear more.
Now, these results on their own were well worth publishing, but we still had the statin arm to come. So following a washout period, I began the statin phase with my starting LDL at 421 milligrams per deciliter and similar body composition. After 3 weeks on 20 milligrams rosuvastatin, my LDL cholesterol started to plateau in the 280s and 290s with a low of 284 milligrams per deciliter during the 6-week phase.
Yeah, see that's what I'm talking about. It doesn't take it down that far. And those are drugs that you're taking for the purpose of lowering your LDL so that you can be healthy, so that you won't get heart disease, so that you won't have clogged arteries, according to what they tell us, right? And there's a few things about statins that I've heard that I can't really ramble off the top of my head right now, but ultimately it tends to remove some of the cholesterol you want to have and not the cholesterol you don't want to have. In other words, the large, fluffy, buoyant LDL, if you've ever heard about this at all, those are the type of LDL you would want to have, not the small, dense, heavy ones that can slip through the gaps in your system and cause damage to your blood vessel walls and things like that. It actually leaves you with the more dangerous ones from what I remember studying when you use statins. But it takes longer and it doesn't reduce them as much. So you still have high LDL, you're taking the statin, and it takes this long. And I bet you after that it started to increase, because I've noticed that they would have to increase their amount of statins that they would take as time went on. The patients that I dealt with in the past, I wasn't the prescribing doctor, and I'm not a medical doctor. I am not a medical anything for that matter. Even having been a retirement home administrator, I'm just a layman who was there to make sure that the medications they were given matched what the doctor said and that they got them on time. So, I have a little bit of experience with this, but I am not able to give you any medical advice about this. But just thinking about the fact that a statin works this way and eating Oreo cookies works as well as it does ought to tell you something about whether or not this is actually beneficial to even be doing. Because eating Oreo cookies certainly shouldn't amount to some kind of positive outcome, let alone a more positive outcome than the medically suggested protocol. That's my opinion on it so far, but I'd like to hear what his summation or summary of this would be.
Notice how this compares to the Oreo arm. 12 Oreos per day lowered my LDL by 273 milligrams per deciliter, or 71%, while high-intensity statin therapy only lowered my LDL by 137 milligrams per deciliter, or 32.5%. In other words, Oreo cookies were 2 times as potent as the statin for lowering my LDL cholesterol.
How insane is that?
Summarize. The Oreo arm resulted in a lowering of my LDL from 384 to 111 milligrams per deciliter in 16 days, for a drop of 273 milligrams per deciliter, or 71%. The statin arm, by contrast, lowered my LDL from 421 to 284 milligrams per deciliter over a course of 6 weeks, with a drop of 173 milligrams per deciliter, or 32.5%. At its nadir. So, Oreo cookies, in this context, in me, were 2 times as potent for cholesterol lowering as high-intensity statin therapy.
I think it was more than 2 times because it did it faster.
You agree. The results of this experiment are mind-boggling.
Yeah.
True, it's an N=1 experiment, but the results were predicted by the lipid energy model, which were the impetus for this experiment. The results are consistent with other data on this population known as lean mass hyperresponders. And all this aside, even if this were an outlier response, shouldn't we be curious as to why?
Yeah.
In the coming years, we are pursuing many larger scale, rigorous projects with scientific luminaries from around the world who are becoming interested in the lipid energy model and lean mass hyperresponders. So for now, you can consider this Oreo versus statin experiment and published paper a hook, an invitation for you to join us on what I know will be a fascinating scientific journey that I am so excited for. So join us.
Well, I'm going to join you the best way I can, and that's to share this information on my channel. And I hope you guys will go and click the link in the description to the original video so you can share that one with your friends. And just ask them, especially if they're on a statin or they have any weight issues that they're worried about. Maybe they're worried about their blood pressure or their heart or something. Statins probably come into play in their lives in some way or another as a result of that. And if their doctor's talking about putting them on a statin, they might want to ask their doctor, why don't I just eat Oreos? And see what the doctor says. Because there's no doubt, based on what I've researched when it comes to LDL cholesterol, that we are chasing the wrong thing here. We're on a wild goose chase when it comes to looking at LDL cholesterol as being the end-all, be-all of bad cholesterol in our bodies. Because I know too many very healthy people who have very high LDL cholesterol that are doing the best they've ever done in their life. Many of them have 0 CAC scores. I've never had a CAC done myself. I'd like to be able to get some of these tests done so that I can know better for myself. And maybe I could even participate in a test like this. So if Nicholas Norowitz wants to reach out to me to include me in his study, because my LDL numbers are extremely low compared to most carnivores, and I eat nothing but meat, and I eat nothing but beef. I eat fat. It's just amazing how much fat I eat. You would think my cholesterol would be off the charts, but it's not. So I'd love to be able to be included in one of these studies so that we could understand what's going on in a person like me. I'm not complaining about it, though. I'm glad to be healthy. But I will say that I want to understand this better So, because one of the biggest questions I run into all the time as a carnivore is, what about LDL? What about your cholesterol? What about your heart? You're going to get cancer. There's a number of things, but cholesterol is the number one thing that I bump into. And I show them my numbers, and they're just blown away. Even my doctor is blown away. And he's for the carnivore diet, and he's surprised at my numbers. But for a lot of people who are on a carnivore diet, they do have those high LDL numbers. They have beautiful HDL numbers. And HDL numbers should be high because that's the part of your cholesterol that's actually picking up all the junk in your system and taking it back to your liver to be recycled. And then your triglycerides being low is obviously healthy for you. I don't know how to describe why that's healthy, except that it was always something that I heard when I was younger. And I still hear it from the carnivore doctors that low triglycerides are a very good thing. As a matter of fact, that combination of high HDL and low triglycerides and a good metabolic health where your waistline is a normal size. I wear a size 32 pants now. I'm 6 feet tall. I've got everything that a doctor looks for great metabolic health, even though they don't have as much metabolic training as we would like them to have, because there's not a whole lot of prescribing they can do for that. But anyway, I just found this study extremely interesting, and I thought it would be something you could share with people. I wanted to help trumpet the message of what they're doing here so that we could get more people aware of this amazing study and hopefully get more people healthy, finding a way to get all of the problems out of their life with a better way of eating as opposed to a whole bunch of drugs. And I hope you'll share this with your friends. And I hope that if you haven't given carnivore a look, or lion diet in my case, you might want to check it out because it could be a big game changer for you too. That's all I got for this time, guys. I'll see you next time.
If we pay extra, could we maybe get some grease or fat?